Hi, in this tutorial we're going to light this chef using some basic lighting and rendering options. To start, we'll open up the render view window. This shows you the render in your scene as well as access to a few camera and render setting options. By default, Maya includes a light in your scene so that if you render without any lights you can still see something. If you turn this off, you can see that without anything in our scene, it is pitch black. Additionally, while we're here in the render setting options, you can choose your renderer, set your resolution, and ensure that your output is the correct file format. Choosing something like JPEG or PNG is good for still images, whereas you want to pick a movie format for your first animations. You can also change how your file is named when you're done and the range for your animation, as well as what cameras you wish to render from. So to get started on lighting, we're going to click the Render tab here, and then we have options for a bunch of different kinds of lights. The light you have the most control over is a spotlight. If I click it, I create a spotlight on the scene, and you can see nothing has really changed. In order to have an easier time lighting, we can use the benefits of the viewport to use all the lights available in the scene as opposed to the default illumination. Now when we move our spotlight around, we can see that it illuminates the character only where it's aiming, and the rest of the character is dark. You can adjust any light using transformation tools such as rotation, translation. Scale doesn't really matter except in the case of area lights, but it will increase the size of the manipulator, which can be useful for selecting. You can also move lights around using the manipulator tool. By pressing T, you will end up with a light target, which you can then snap to, say, the character's nose. With the light target, you can move the base of the light around, changing the light angle, but keeping it focused on the important subject. You can also change things by clicking this little wheel, such as the angle of the spotlight, the amount of penumbra or fall off, and things like drop off and so forth. You can also adjust them down here for more precise. The penumbra controls how sharp the light is. A penumbra of 0 means a sharp spotlight, and as it continues to go higher, the light gets softer and softer. Very high values of penumbra are useful for generally illuminating areas without creating the effect of a particular light source. The intensity of the light affects how bright it is. Things that are too bright will end up being washed out and white, and things that are too dark clearly will be completely underexposed. If we open up our render view, we can now take a look to see what this light looks like in our actual render. And it's pretty close to the viewport since this is a basic setup. But now we're going to want to add some extra lights to our scene to flesh out the character, as well as control a few light options. The main light in our scene is usually something we want to cast shadows. In order to cast shadows, we also need something to receive shadows. So let's make a basic plane. By default, shadows are turned off in order to save on performance issues. But if we turn on shadows in the display, we can see now our chef is casting a shadow behind him, and the effect of the spotlight is much more clear. When we render, the shadow seems to disappear. That's because in our light we have a ray traced shadow. If we use depth map shadows instead, it'll show up in the render or we can change the render options and turn on ray tracing. Depth map shadows are fast to render, but unless you up the resolution, they can appear grainy and have aliased edges. In order to improve the appearance of your scene, it's useful to add more than just one key light. A directional light is a good option for filling in some extra spots on your scene. You can see when I move this directional light around, it has a great big effect on the whole scene. That's because the directional light doesn't have only a particular cone of effects, but are everything in one spot. This is good for simulating, say, sunlight. But it can also be good for filling in areas in the scene, especially if we turn off the shadows of both types. Now it's only illuminating the character. Then, if we turn down the intensity to something rather small, the effect of this light is just to fill in some gaps on the character, simulating the bounce of light around a normal room. Now you can see the areas of our character that were pitch black are now have a little bit of illumination, which simulates the effect of real light a lot more realistically. We can add one more kind of light. In this case, we're going to use a spotlight again. This kind of light is called a rim light. A rim light is usually on the opposite side of your character. And quite bright, and it's used to pick out the outer edge of the character. In this case, let's just turn the intensity up very high right now, and you can see the edge of the character has become illuminated. By using this manipulator mode, we can easily find just the edge of the character that we want to highlight and pick out from the black background. Now you can see the edge of the character here really stands out, whereas previously it can tend to sort of fade into the darkness. A rim light is a great way of simulating bright light from a source, or just intentionally highlighting an area in a way that might not be realistic but is artistic. Keep in mind that the effect of a light on your object is half the light and half the effect on the texture of your character. In this case, the chef, if I change his ambient color, you can see he appears brighter in the scene as I drag this up and down. And in the render view, if I render just a region, you can see changes to the texture has brightened up the character, not changes to the lighting. So you want to make sure to light your characters or your objects with their actual textures and adjust both parameters for the best effects. When you are done, all you have to do to export your image out of Maya is go to File and Save Image. Pick a name that you want and you're all set.